What was your best you have no power here moment? Story 1. I coach gymnastics at a very highly competitive gym. One of my duties was to select and train the youngest talent for compulsory team training. Parents caught on to what I was doing when I pulled kids from rec classes and got all nail-biting excited, but never confronted me if I didn't pursue a kid for higher training. Until one high-powered exec mom did yelling in the lobby that I was blind, couldn't see Susie's talent. Her somersault is better than all the other 5-year-olds in class. We should be training her for free because did we know her soccer coach thinks she's a star's star? I told her competitive gymnastics is a family commitment, and while Susie is great, her family is what didn't make the cut. Story 2, I'd found another job and was just waiting it out to get my bonus. For about 3 months, I was free to express myself in ways I wouldn't have otherwise. I had noticed that my vacation time had not been approved and normally would have asked about it, but decided to see how it might play out. My manager called me in about 2 weeks before my vacation to inform me that it was denied. I wasn't the least upset, but I informed her I was going anyway. She threatened me every way under the sun, which only made me laugh at her. Everyone was surprised when I left her office smiling as they had heard her. I went to my desk, printed off my resignation, and gave it to her, got my bonus, got my vacation, and also got an extra 2 weeks paid because I was going to a competitor and they didn't want me sharing information. Story 3 had a client freak out on us and harass us with phone calls every few minutes because we couldn't accommodate her needs. She wanted to make her countertops larger than the actual slab of granite. You can't grow rock, so we just refused her deposit and told her to not call us anymore. She was speechless. She was trying to get a discount, and now she's got to start the whole process elsewhere. We don't abide by the customer is always right. Edit for all those asking. We can absolutely seam 2 slabs together, but she rejected this solution because she's dumb. Story 4, got out of the Army and joined the Air Force National Guard in my home state. 20 minutes after leaving my new base for the first time, I receive a phone call from a guy introducing himself as a Sergeant First Class from the Army Reserve, informing me that his system shows my name had been pulled from the reserve pool to deploy to Iraq within 3 months and congratulated me. Kindly informed him that 1, I had just returned from deployment before getting out and was still guaranteed more than 3 months stateside, and 2, I had enlisted with the Air Guard and therefore exempt. He got irritated, raises his tone of voice, and said, well, you better get that paperwork to me ASAP, because my system says you're going. Told him I signed a contract which binds me to that, not your system. So I told him it's not my job to update to ensure your system for you. I gave him the name of the organization I was now affiliated with, city and state it was in, my recruiter's name, rank, and personal phone number. Now you have several different ways to contact who you need to in order to get your system updated, and hung up on him. Story 5, my boss sold the company, and about a week after the official switch to the new owners, he called me up to ask me to do something. I told him my consulting fees were 120 hours. He didn't take me up on it, unfortunately. Story 6, I once worked for a shady company that sold and repaired expensive American vacuum cleaners. I was the service manager. I had planned a 6-week scuba diving trip with a mate for 2 years. They were well aware of this and said it was fine. When the time came close, I put in my application for 6 weeks leave. I was called into the husband-wife owner's office and told that I could only take 3 weeks. I'd save the time up with their permission. I pointed this out, but they were adamant that 3 weeks was the most they were prepared to authorize. I even tried to negotiate them to 5 weeks, but that was firmly rejected. So I walked from the office, wrote my resignation letter, and left. Had a great holiday diving the Great Barrier Reef. They rang me weekly for a solid 3 months, offering all sorts of incentives to come back. But by then I had won a great government job. Utonian, and my last job was hired to be on doing PC repair, only to be told an hour before my first shift that there wasn't any hours available for that, and they could put me elsewhere. Begrudgingly, I accepted as I turned down another position and needed the work. Fast forward a few months, and the manager decides that I'm going to be filling in for the only person handling shipping and receiving for this giant department store single-handedly, with 3 days training. Of course, things aren't going so well, as this is a 2-person position at a minute for 8 hours, and I'm expected to do in 6. The last day on the job, I'm swamped as vendors are fighting with each other over dock space, and another manager comes up freaking out at me because I couldn't get the extra work I had told her repeatedly couldn't be done was done. Exasperated, I pleaded my case, to which she callously said, I don't give a. Now I'm getting mad. She replied to me at this point and says, do you know who you're talking to? I replied, yeah, the is who is now running this show, cause I'm out 11. 35 an hour with my promised hours gutted was not worth it. Story 7, I worked at a Domino's, and there was this old lady who ordered from us a lot and was always unpleasant. One day, she calls and makes an order that she must make a lot because she knew exactly how much it was supposed to cost down to the penny. I put her order in and tell her how much it is, and she starts getting upset because the order was 2 cents more than what it usually is and starts accusing me of trying to steal money from her. She asks, how much money do you make stealing 2 cents from every customer? Well, if I was trying to steal money and I did it to 100 customers, I would have made a whole $2. I didn't know what to do because she wouldn't accept the order unless it was exactly how much she thought it should be, and there's nothing I can do to remove 2 cents from an order. So I asked the manager, and she just tells me to hang up. I was new at that time, and I'm guessing this wasn't the first time that store got with by her. It felt amazing. That was the only time I ever got to do that to a customer. Story 8, my mother-in-law passed away last year, and my wife and I got rid of the leftover stuff. Most was easy, except the ATT router for her internet access. We got a total runaround. I brought it into an ATT store, the same one my MIL had signed up from, and they said it had to be returned in some special box from the local post office. We went to the post office and were told the special box came from ATT. We went back to ATT in a different city and were told yet another BS story. It caused my wife an amazing amount of grief. Her mother had just died. She's trying to do the adult thing and responsibly close out her mother's accounts. And ATT was just being a bunch of clowns. The router became her albatross. The router sat in the trunk of the car for weeks. One day I'm grabbing lunch and notice another ATT. I walk inside and up to a desk where a rep is talking internet plans with another customer. I don't interrupt, but the rep pauses to give me a story about how I can't return the router here and will need to set up a return with the central office. I calmly put the router on her desk and said, no, I won't be doing that. The owner of this account just died and just trying to give you your property back. You've given me the runaround for weeks now and am done. As I turn to walk away, she yells, but we're just going to throw it away if you leave it here. You'll get charged for it. Okay, bye me. I toss over my shoulder as I walk out the door. Good luck collecting from a dead woman. I occasionally wonder if the other customer stuck around or not. But then I remember who runs the FCC, and it's not like there's a real choice in ISPs in most areas of the country. Story 9, over the course of 6 months, through countless phone calls to different union offices and the Department of Labor, I eventually got my boss fired for changing people's time, keeping information to steal overtime from them. During those months, I was treated like absolute dog by this guy, but I never actually did anything wrong, so I couldn't be punished. At one point, management, against contract rules, denied my time off request to be in my best friend's wedding, and my boss brought me in his office and threatened to fire me. At this point, I had called the Northeast District Business Associate on him, and I will never forget the look on my boss's face when he realized I knew he couldn't do anything to me. Story 10, company did restructuring and laid about 30 of us off. My boss, picture female Limburg, gave me my contract package, which also included a lecture on if I was a better worker, the company wouldn't need to do this. After a month, they realized it was a mistake and told us they were nullifying our contracts and we could have our job back. I told that my attorney wasn't aware of contract nullification given the language in the document, and if they didn't stand by their commitment, we had already retained counsel. So whatever would happen, they came back, said we could have a 1-year package over and above salary if we stayed for a year. I quit on the 366th day, and my boss told me that she was hurt and that this was very hard for her. I called her a sociopath and walked out of the building. Story 11, I used to be a teacher. Leaving the graduation ceremony in my last year, a senior said, and then, oh no, I'm so sorry, Mr. Jetpacks. I said, you're an adult, and I'm not a teacher. I don't give a what you say. Story 12, when I left the job, I was invited to meet with the CEO because he was unhappy I was leaving and wanted to understand why. I explained that I was not being paid enough and the recently announced pay rise was not good enough. He got irritated and in a patronizing tone started trying to lecture me on how I should have handled that situation better. I interrupted him. He didn't like that. So I added him leaving. I have nothing to lose, and then informed him that I had already been let down over pay multiple times, had witnessed others trying to get more pay and being refused, so I had no interest in begging to be paid what I already deserved to be paid. Story 13, guy's birthday. Someone found out he had Guitar Hero 3 and bet people they couldn't beat him. Little did he know I'm super autismo good at it, like had a YouTube channel for a while with custom song FCs, 100 runs that could dry up every vagina in a 10-mile radius level good. Story 14, when mom got ridiculously nasty rude with me in my own home. I just moved into, I told her if doesn't like my food, furniture, clothes, location where my apartment is, the AC, there's the door, gladly lock the top bottoms locks. She SDFU when she realized I was dead serious when I opened the door. Story 15, I'm an ICU nurse. The last 2 nights I've been taking care of a large, strong man going through withdrawals. Involves 4-point restraints. This morning I was trying to put elbow pads on him, and he swung at me. But of course the restraints prevented this. He was furious as I just stood there and slow blinked at him. Story 16, I was in a wedding party, and there was a brief lull in between scheduled parts, and we were all just milling around waiting. The bridesmaid, known for being obnoxiously bossy, starts barking out orders to every single person. As soon as she's finished, the wedding planner who was standing behind her chimes in with "Nobody do any of that," and then told us to sit tight. It was great. Story 17, parents came to visit me at my apartment back in college. I typically always have the door locked, but if I'm expecting company, I'll unlock it, so I can just tell come in. All my friends knew this because we all did similar, but we all had the courtesy to knock on each other's doors. Parents came and just walked straight in. I calmly got up off the couch and made them go back outside and knock. My dad laughed and tried to argue, but I was having none of it. Not under my roof. That felt good. Story 18, I work for a pipeline company. One of our lines brings fuel into a refinery. We needed something changed out on our line and needed it done ASAP. Timing was critical because after a few days of not being about to deliver into the refinery, it would back up our system and shut down the whole pipeline. Big problem. The refinery guys were total douchebags and were obviously used to being in charge and definitely didn't take orders from a young female. For 2 days, I got to remind them that I fuel your refinery. Oh, you don't think you can get to this today? I hope you don't mind explaining this when our pipeline is down and your refinery shuts down. Felt so good, man. Girls try to get me to buy them drinks at bars a lot. I make sure to introduce them to my boyfriend very politely as I decline. Story 19, and the most senior employee here. So I'm technically the boss. Know you're covering from another department. Regardless of how long you've worked here, you're only filling in and are not employed for us. You're technically the least senior according to company policy, even less senior than the girl who started 20 minutes before you got here. Story 20, TLDR, credit union tried to bill my father's estate for a car they wouldn't provide documentation for. I told them in detail why that wasn't going to happen. After my father passed away, there was a small amount of estate-related issues to take care of. I was the legal executor of his estate. While I was sorting through things, I started getting letters from a local credit union regarding a credit card account of his that they wanted paid off. Problem was, I could find no evidence on my end in all of Dad's paperwork of his having had that credit card. And though I knew he had a savings account with them, I didn't recall any prior bills from them regarding said credit card. And I'd been handling his bills for close to a year before he passed away. I went in to ask for evidence and got told that only the CEO could handle the matter. She was on vacation that week, so I left my name and number to have her get back to me. When she finally called me back, she didn't offer evidence, but instead offered a number of demands that I immediately pay the money, and that if there wasn't enough money in Dad's estate, I should sell the house he had owned for an alleged debt of about $600. Pointing out that he had not, in fact, owned said house for quite some time by the time he died fell on deaf ears. The letters continued, some personally written and rather harassing in tone. I was feeling rather concerned, as I didn't know exactly what they could do or what my options were. I know, the smart thing would have been to retain an estate lawyer to handle it. But what do you do when you're not an attorney and don't have the money to retain one? I had been handling things myself as the most financially minded of my siblings and trying to handle things as a matter of common sense and common decency. There weren't a lot of assets or debts with the estate. It seemed like it should be pretty straightforward, and other than this one case, all of it went smoothly. Fortunately, Oregon's estate laws are actually really easy to read for a layperson. I spent several nights studying the various sections and determined exactly how things should go, and wrote a letter sent certified delivery with a return receipt back to the credit union CEO. In the letter, I stated the following. First, that as there was no evidence presented for the claim, I was formally denying it in my capacity as executor, which the law allowed, with a window of opportunity of 30 days to appeal the design decision in court. Second, that if she wished to make an appeal to me personally and save on the court fees, she needed to provide documentation of the account, including a record of all transactions and charges to justify the amount claimed. Naturally, I got a letter back 4 weeks later. It contained some paperwork, including the paperwork establishing Dad's savings account, but nothing establishing a credit card. Further, the letter stated that it would be too onerous to provide full records of all the transactions. Any bankers out there, take note, never tell a programmer it's too difficult for you to access your own data. We know it's either bullshit or that you're admitting incompetence. This would have been a 5-minute database query for me. And that's if I had to look up the tables first. It reiterated the demand for immediate payment, again stating the house again, not actually Dad's, but she kept insisting it was needed to be sold to pay for it. I wrote another letter. In this letter, I clarified several points for her. First, that if she had not provided the required documentation, she had not actually made an appeal that would be subject to evaluation, let alone acceptance therefore. The original denial of the claim stood unchanged. Second, that it was not her place to determine my father's assets, as she was not executor of the estate. Third, that even if her claim had been granted, Oregon law requires 6 months from the decedent's passing to receive all claims before any of those claims may be paid out, and by demanding immediate payment, she was attempting to get me to break the law. Fourth, that Oregon law declares the priority of claims by the nature of them, and credit card debts were rank NIE. Everything not covered above, where the above included taxes, medical debts, and various other things, even if her claim had been granted, she could not be paid unless there was money left after paying all higher priority debts. And even if the house had been included, that wouldn't have been the case. And fifth, as the 1-month deadline for appealing in court would expire by the time they received this letter, they had exhausted all of their legal options, and further attempts to pursue the claim would constitute unlawful harassment, and charges would be pressed in such an instance. I didn't hear back from them again. Story 21, I was a manager at a strip club for around 10 years, and we always love the customers who complain about nonsense and think something will happen because the world has taught them the customer is always right. I used to give them a piece of paper and a pen and tell them to write it all down, and they'll put it in the suggestion box. When they were done and handed me the paper, I'd deball it up and throw it right in the garbage can and tell them their complaint had been filed. Story 22, I got a fine for drinking on the street when I was 15. In Spain, you received the fines through a letter, and the letter arrived at my previous address, where only my older sister lived at the moment. This paid the fine with my money, but tried to blackmail me with everything. Tired of this, I told my parents, and when I finally didn't comply with one of my sister's demands, she told them. They just told her that she was a snitch and such a shitty sister. It was like seeing someone trying to kill me with a blank round. Story 23, I'm gay, but nobody ever guesses it just by looking at me. I was a lifeguard one year, and this one Trini girl doesn't want to do X. I think it was collecting some weights at the bottom of the pool, or whatever. She starts laying it on thick, hair toss, batting eyes, titties up and out just to get me to do it for her. I laughed myself all the way home. Story 24, I told my mom if she kept acting like an ID, happily pull the car over and make her walk the rest of the way home. She kept acting like a duck and was very shocked when I legitimately pulled over and told her to get out. Story 25 has a teacher whose class I was trying to drop because she would leave every single morning for an hour to work with the student government corner me in a doorway. While in high school, she made several threats towards my grade and myself, getting other teachers to drag me down. I went straight to the office and complained. The office refused to take action, and the school resource officer let everything slide. So I called the police and told them what was happening. The sergeant talked to the school officer briefly. Then after that, they called the teacher to the office and showed her the film. The look of fear she had on her face as she realized I held all the cards and she up was glorious. In exchange for not pressing charges, I was allowed to drop her class. She was removed from her duties as the student government supervisor and was barred from ever teaching AP classes in the district. Story 26, a few years ago, my ex-wife left me in a hurry, and then the weekend afterwards demanded that I be home around lunchtime so that she could pick up some things she left behind. Some friends of mine had organized to take me out to lunch in the city that day because I was feeling about the whole situation, and it was the first time in years that I was able to say no. I have plans, and you'll have to work around them. Felt amazing to put myself first for once. Story 27, don't know if this counts. I had a shitty group project teammate in college. Didn't do any work. He applied for the company I worked for about a year after college. My bosses asked if I knew him, and I said yup. Don't hire him was the ultimate peer review revenge. Story 28, I guess probably yesterday. I went to Mickey D's for some dinner, and the lady served the guy in front of me first, then started to work on my McFlurry. She was about to put in the MMS when the first guy came back, complaining that they usually added more ice cream than that. For the record, he's talking about an inch of ice cream. For anyone unfamiliar with the ice cream going in a cup process at McDonald's, they put the ice cream in first, then put the lid on, then put the toppings in, then swirl it. Dude was mad because the ice cream wasn't going all the way to the top of the lid after being swirled. Before the argument could really get started, I interrupted them and asked her if she could please finish up my McFlurry before dealing as greedy. I remember she said sure, turned to the machine, then turned back to me with an incredulous look on her face and said thank you. Then the dude thanked me too. I quickly informed him not to thank me because I was 100 not on his side at all and that I thought he was ridiculous for arguing over an inch of ice cream. At this point, she's put the toppings in, and he really said, let's do an analysis here, and started comparing how my McFlurry looked like it had more ice cream in it than his because it reached halfway up the lid. It's at this point that she pointed out she had yet to swirl it. Lo and behold, once she swirled it, our ice cream looked nearly identical. At this point, the manager came over, wondering why this dude had raised his voice. I explained he was mad because he didn't receive an extra inch of ice cream and got mad that swirling seemingly makes the ice cream magically disappear, and the manager laughed in the guy's face. Story 29, I was let go from a nonprofit for no reason. Wasn't in rich enough circles to be able to attract money to the org. I then got a job at a large funder for nonprofits. The nonprofit eventually came knocking, and I had the ear of the CEO. I didn't end up saying anything, but it was one of the most satisfying moments in my life to have that power and a friendly reminder to treat all people well. Story 30, I was working for a huge clothing store chain as a temp student worker one summer many years ago. I worked there for 2 days before one of the employees started acting weird around me, bossing me around. We weren't working in the same department, so she shouldn't even have been telling me anything, coming to the changing rooms where I was folding the discarded clothes, to talk on the internal phone next to me, to say, OMG, the new student hasn't even finished what you asked her to do yet, WTF. She's wasting my time and basically just being demeaning for no reason. One day, I realized she was following me around the store, hiding behind clothes racks, or watching me while pretending to be folding pants. She wasn't even in her own area, so she stuck out like a sore thumb. At one point, she started coming up to me to berate me for the smallest things. She was leaving and coming back every few minutes doing the same routine until she had a real grievance about something I forgot to pick up in the stockroom, and she sent me there to do it immediately. I'd been there only a few minutes when guess who walks in? The crazy stalker. She started yelling at me, telling me everything I did wrong, that I was sitting around instead of working. I sat once to do my shoelaces. She said, "You're up in my store." She was barely above me, working 20 hours a week. I listened and replied to some things until she got to the end of her rant and delivered what was to be her mic drop line. "Well, anyway, you're just a temp worker." I just looked at her and said, "Well, yeah, I'm a student. I'm just here to pay my plane ticket to go on vacation. You're stuck here." The best part was she wanted to talk to the floor manager afterwards, saying I yelled at her and called her all kinds of names. The manager came up to me and told me that the girl was crazy and was doing the same thing every time a new temp student came in, to the point they had a hard time finding student workers. I asked the day after to be sent to another store. Story 31, one day, after we got our results, we were already and officially not part of the school anymore. We were walking out and chatting, laughing about the good times when the French teacher, who everyone hates, comes out and says we owe her a 2-hour detention for not getting an A for her class. She was literally mad cause she got refused a raise promotion cause she was a bad teacher. I got a total A with a C in her class. When my mate said, "Oh, if you were a teacher," and tries to walk past, she physically tries to block him, and she says, "No, you're going to stay." He replies, "WTF are you going to do? Expel me." The funny part is that she rushed to get other teachers to back her up, but they hated her as well. Story 32, we had a company break contract in the middle of drilling a hole. Got told to pack it up right now and get off the site in 48 hours, or else the rig is forfeit. My boss, the tool pusher, had us cut off the drill string and let it fall 200 feet, so the next drilling company had to fish it out. The pusher and I stayed up for 42 hours straight while we had 2 crews working to the wall. Anyways, this company man, he worked for the client and usually gets in our way, kept telling our guys that we couldn't do this or couldn't do that, and that wasn't allowed by our contract. There wasn't a soul there that paid attention to him. Story 33, I worked for a school board and they contracted me to do some additional work on the side, creating a website. When it was complete, I went to the guy for presentation and payment, and he told me he wouldn't be paying me and there was nothing I could do. I leaned over and deleted the site. He seemed curiously surprised somehow. I giggled. He later wanted the website restored and he would pay me with stolen school merchandise. I told him I wasn't going to steal from children and teachers just so he could have leverage over me. Another time, I had made a website allowing people to send messages to the members of the school board. He later wanted me to send him the messages so he could vet them. I added him to the CC of every message. I was then asked in a board meeting why he was also getting these messages, and I told them why he felt entitled to their private communications. They talked to him. When I put in my notice there, he came to my cubicle on a busy floor and told me I'd have to pay them back for training they sent me to. He said it so quietly too. So I asked him if he was threatening me, but I said it loudly, so everyone came to see what was up. He literally fled. What a tool. Story 34. When I was at school, I was having trouble with this one guy. Not a bully exactly, but we didn't get on. We were later put in separate houses. Anyway, during one shouting match, he made a big thing about how he was whatever rank in the Army cadets. I stopped for a second and just said, "But I'm not in the cadets." "But I outrank you. I don't have a rank. I'm not in the Army, so you're not above me." And then he said, "But if martial law were declared," and I couldn't really carry on after that. Story 35, one of my old English teachers was giving me a hard time about writing. accusing me of plagiarism in one of the final assignments I wrote and marking me down because I didn't write it a certain way. I turned around and said, "Oh, you mean just like the lawsuit you're currently defending against that accuses you of plagiarism?" If her jaw could have hit the floor, it would have. She was utterly speechless and thought no one knew about her ongoing lawsuits. Yeah, I knew about them, both of them. I also found out about the third one that got her fired from school when they showed a huge disparity in mark scores because she excessively marked down someone who wrote something she didn't like in the Australian equivalent of the SATs, only for them to turn around and have it marked at two other schools. That was a few years after my encounter, though. She had a real chip on her shoulder with me after that. But man, totally worth it. There was another one where a guy tried to physically assault me in Seattle, only to realize he bit off more than he could chew and ate pavement instead. Story 36, I am 5'4" male who looks less muscular than I am. I was in line for priority boarding, and it had just started when the woman behind me said, "Excuse me, this is for priority boarding. You need to wait with everyone else." I ignored her and presented my boarding pass with my active duty ID. My only revenge was when the attendant said, "Thank you for your service." I turned to the woman behind me, grinned, and said thanks before boarding. Story 37, a few years ago, a water main burst at the end of our street, causing traffic to be detoured for a few days through the parking lot of a retirement community 2 blocks from my house. It ironically was a bit of a shortcut on my way home from work, but I'd never taken it before because it was private property. A few days after they fixed the break and opened the road again, traffic was super jammed up, and I turned off early to take the shortcut through the parking lot, just because on that day, a resident of the retirement place who was parking saw me and followed me home. She pulled into my building's parking lot right behind me, and as I stepped out after parking, she yelled from her window that I trespassed on private property, and I should never do that again. I looked her dead in the eye, pointed to the private property sign she had driven past as she pulled into our lot, and said, "Sounds like a deal." Story 38, oh, I'm late to this, and this is one of the best situations. I had a boss in a job I worked at for 11 years. He was a total, ran the place like it was a prison camp, and wrote people up for nothing. He was a senior manager and pretty high up her corporate ladder, and I was a laborer doing labor work. I was actually on a temp contract and was given FT by another manager, and this guy told me if it were my decision, I would have just let the contract run out. Anyways, years went by, and I gradually moved up the ladder. Around year 8, he was let go in order to change it up a bit, and that was the last I saw of him. I eventually moved on and into a management role at a new company reporting to just a single senior manager, and then the president, my manager, was promoted to a director role in another area, and the job became vacant. Guess who applied? He searched the place out on LinkedIn and found I was there, and he name-dropped me in his interview. He sent me a message saying he'd appreciate it if I put in a good word for him. Yeah, well, I wasn't going to work for Hitler twice, so I told him politely I'm sorry, but I don't feel your leadership style is suited for this work environment. I then told HR the same thing and some of the stories of the past. He didn't get hired, that guy. So my military service was problematic, it suffices to say. Eventually things got to the point where I was invited to leave on terms that I found acceptable. Turns out it was a bluff on their part, and I was almost immediately offered a path to redemption. Straighten up and fly right, as it were, no thanks. This came as something of a surprise to all involved except me, who had spent the better part of a year trying to engineer it. So there was a bit of a scramble to find details to encourage me to reconsider, clean up excess wax in the halls with a toothbrush, mow the lawn, whatever they could think of. Did it all with a smile on my face and a song in my heart. Best part was my lunches. I parked my vehicle directly across from the smoking area where my supervisor, boss, and his boss came out every hour or so. Every day, for those last 2 weeks take a 2 to 3 hour nap in my car for everyone to see. Someone came out a couple of times to suggest I get back to work, but I was just like, nah, I'm good. I mean, what were they going to do? Fire me.